So I'm sitting here with Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone. I'm just going to run through a few of your accomplishments. So 4-time Olympic gold medalist, 3-time world champion. You've broken the world record in the 400-meter hurdles 5 times?
6.
6 times. So, Sydney, talk about, how you got into sports. Were you always fast? Was track always your sport? You had play other sports? How'd you get started?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family of track runners. Both of my parents ran track. My mom ran the 800. My dad ran the 400, so 400 hurdles is the perfect mixture of those two. My first race, I was 6 years old. My dad entered me in the 100 meters, and I was like, I do not want to do this. And he was like, I will give you a chocolate bar. And I was like, okay, deal. And I actually ended up winning the race. But I literally didn't care, to be honest. I was worried about the chocolate bar. But I think even in that moment, my parents knew. They were like, okay, there's something different about her. I did basketball, I did soccer, I did dance. But track was always the one that stuck with me. And I think once I got to middle school and high school specifically, that's when I started to realize that this was something I loved to do and something that I think God had given me a gift to do.
So when you realized in high school, what was that moment? Was there a specific moment where you realized that you had a special gift, a special talent?
I mean, I would say probably making the Olympic team my junior year.
Right, you did make the Olympic team at 16 years old. So yeah, that would be a moment that might let you know, right?
Yeah, I think just that moment of just lining up against other professionals, women who had trained for that moment for so long, and being a junior in high school, just being here for the experience and actually making the team. I think for me that solidified that, okay, I may not know what I'm doing here, but there's a reason that I am here, and I'm going to soak up as much as I can and take it with me for the future.
So you almost made the final. This was 2016 Rio Olympics. You just short of making the final.
Yeah.
So all of us sort of looking at you, thinking, wow, that's an impressive accomplishment at 16 years old. Was it for you? Was it, yeah, this was great? Or were you disappointed? Was it motivation for the future? What was your perspective on that experience at 16, almost making the final with just missing out?
I honestly think I wasn't prepared for that moment, and I don't think I would have been ready to make that final. There was a part of me even going into the semifinal that didn't want to make the final because I was nervous about what that pressure would feel like, at 16 years old, standing on the line, possibly being able to get an Olympic medal. And I think there was just so much I didn't know. For me, I think I was relieved that I didn't move on. But I also knew that this was my dream. I wanted to one day win a gold medal. I wanted to break the world record. I just knew that time wasn't it.
Yeah. So for those who don't understand, the 400-meter hurdles, because our sport is, the greatness of it is that it's very simple for people to follow. the gun goes off, everybody just runs, and the first person to the finish line wins, right? It's very simple. Keep turning left.
Yep.
But 400-meter hurdles, 10, 30-inch barriers. Explain to those who don't understand the skill of the sport, how do you do it well? What does it take to run 400-meter hurdles and do it well?
It's a wonderful question. I mean, first you're running a whole lap at full speed while jumping over 10 barriers, like you said. But it requires the speed. It requires the strength. It requires the endurance. It requires the flexibility to be able to hurdle. It requires the skill to be able to switch legs when you get tired or whatever it is. And so I really feel like it encompasses the whole athlete. And that's why it is one of the most grueling events, because you're running full speed. You have to be strong enough to hold it, and you have to be flexible enough and wise enough to know which leg to take each hurdle with. And so it's a gruesome event, but I think that's part of why I love it.
At the same time, as you're sort of, going through the mental, technique of, which leg, how close am I to the hurdle, all of these different things, you're still racing against the other people. You're kind of not, because you're so far ahead of everyone usually, but they are in the race. It is still a race. How aware are you of the other competitors, and are you making any adjustments in the race based on what they're doing?
Yeah, I think you're always aware, right? Especially when you can see the girls outside of you. You know who's going over the hurdle first is who's in the lead. So I think I'm always cognizant of it, especially going down the backstretch. But ultimately, you have to run your race. You have your race plan. I know what my coach has told me to execute. And I know once you get to hurdle 7, hurdle 8, that's when the race really starts. And from there, it's just giving it everything you have and making sure you get over the hurdles clean coming home.
So let's talk about pressure. So, this is, with all due respect to other sports, which means I'm going to disrespect those sports. Okay. In every other sport, if you don't win the championship, it's kind of, okay, well, I'll try again next year.
Yeah.
With the Olympics, there is no next year.
Yep.
When you're standing there before, behind the blocks, it's the Olympic final. You know that in the next, for me, it was, 19 seconds. I'm either going to be Olympic champion or not. For you, it's 50 seconds. I'm going to be the Olympic champion or not. Talk about what's happening in that moment and how you manage that sort of pressure in the moment of knowing that it all comes down to this.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is one of the most unforgiving sports, for sure. It's not like baseball, football, basketball. You don't get a next play, right? You get this one moment, and then, like you said, you have to wait 4 more years to possibly get it again, if that. And I think standing behind those blocks, knowing that once that gun goes off, that's your opportunity. It's really just, number one, enjoying this moment. You're never going to get it back. And I think you're letting everything that you've worked for, all of your training, all of the mental preparation, all of the hard moments that season, just motivate you to give everything you have when it happens. And so it definitely feels like a big weight, but I think the best athletes are those who know how to manage it well.
And that's the point. So how do you manage it? It's different for everyone. Every athlete manages it differently. I remember speaking to Usain Bolt, once about, and he was always doing all of the crazy stuff, out there and it looks like he doesn't, he's not nervous. He doesn't. Yeah. And he told me, he said, I watched you growing up and you were always very serious. I wanted to be like that too. And he said, before the moment, if I was really serious, it just made me so nervous and I didn't run well and I needed to just somehow, sort of take my mind off of it. And if you watch him, he is, doing all of those things. And then when the starter says, runners take your mark, then he goes into focus. So he understood what he needed to do in order to be at his best in the moment. How do you manage the nerves and the weight of the moment? What works for you and how did you figure that out?
I would say my faith is a huge part of it. Just that knowing that my identity is not in whether I win or lose this race first and foremost gives me so much peace to just go out there and use the gift that I've been given. But ultimately, I think in the moment, it's really just everybody says, I look so serious. I'm not waving at the camera. I'm locked in because I know what I'm there to do. And I'm really focused on executing and giving my all to everything that I am here to do. And I'm talking to myself. I'm repeating my race plan in my head. The night before, I'm visualizing, a lot of prayer, a lot of just spending time, in the Word. And once I get on that line, I know that all the preparation has been done. I've done everything I need to do to be prepared for this moment. Now it's just letting the gift shine for itself.
Talk about, that's an interesting one. I use that a lot, like you want to go into that race, you want to go into that championship knowing that you've done everything you could possibly do to be prepared and ready for the moment. Because that's what happens when you're standing there. You start to ask yourself, have I done everything? Maybe I should have, that one day when I just kind of, took that rep off. So talk about backing up, the process of preparing for the moment. Talk about, just like those days when you're training, what is that like and how do you, not just physically, but mentally prepare yourself to be ready for the moment?
Yeah, I think it's almost like replicating what the big moment is going to feel like, right? So when you're doing starts at practice, are you practicing as if this is the race? And what are your emotions going to feel like? What are your nerves going to feel like? What is it going to feel like to push out the first 3 steps and get into your pattern? Doing as much as you can daily to almost emulate that moment, so when the moment comes, you're not scared of it, And for me, it's one day at a time. Some days are going to be better than others. Some practices will be better than others. There might be days I just need to take off the full day and rest because that's what my body's telling me, you know? And I think it's just being cognizant of knowing that the time will slowly chip away, but making sure that I'm doing everything, like I said, within my power to make sure that I'm prepared.
Do those things that obviously, provide, success for you on the track, do those same things find themselves, off the track for you as well in ways that, help you to succeed off the track with anything and, other things in your life? Yeah,
I would say whatever I do, I probably give 100% to. I think my husband could attest to that. Yeah, he's shaking his head, yes. Whatever it is, I think I think it's a mindset. And I think it's how I want to live my life, is knowing that regardless of what I'm doing, I want to give my 100% to it. I want people to know that I care. I want the Lord to know that I care and that I want to do my work well. And yeah, I think it's also the natural competitor. I'm sure in certain ways you just can't help but be competitive in whatever you do. Sometimes I need to tone it back a little bit, but in a lot of ways I do think it does help me to do things to a certain level of excellence.
I want to drill down on that one a little bit. Just when do you need to dial it back? Like, give me an example of when, the natural competitiveness is too much or isn't good for the moment.
Just in daily life. I mean, living life with my husband, he's like, not everything is a competition, not everything is a race. It doesn't matter what we're doing. I'm going to try to do it better. And I just
Did it sound like he was speaking a foreign language when he said that?
But yeah, I mean, there's just even certain moments where, as an athlete, sometimes if we don't maybe understand something right away, like golf, right? Like, I'm not good at golf. And I think part of why I maybe don't want to try golf is because I'm not naturally good at it as a competitor. But I'm sure if I started to realize I could get better, then I would want to be the best golfer in the world. So stuff like that. But I will not try golf. So,
So tell me, what was your worst performance?
That's a great question. What do you mean by that?
She's struggling.
No.
She's struggling.
No, it's just a good question. My worst performance, I mean, I would probably say 2019 Doha World Championships, coming in second to Dalila, who broke the world record. It was an amazing race. She ran so well. But if you actually watch the race back, I didn't even have my hands on the start line because we couldn't figure out the first hurdle. So I was actually starting 2 feet behind the line.
Really?
Yes. And if you watch the end of the race, I think I actually lost by about 2 feet. So it just wasn't my time. There was things I was still figuring out within my hurdle strategy. There were things I was figuring out within my mental preparation. And I was very disappointed in myself after that race, but I'm grateful for the motivation it gave me moving forward.
Yeah. Let's talk about track and field. You joined Grand Slam Track, for which I'm absolutely grateful. We're very excited to see, what you're going to do this year. Let's talk about, what it means to an athlete to, have the opportunity to compete more often, to compete on a big scale. Because the sport is huge during the Olympics. Everyone is watching it. Mm-hmm. It falls off significantly after that. What we're trying to do with Grand Slam Track is to create those big moments, the big stars like yourself, the rivalries, and high stakes. But from an athlete standpoint, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I'm so excited for Grand Slam Track and just the opportunity it is bringing for track athletes to continue to grow our profile, right? You talked about the Olympics being kind of that big stage for us, but I think track and field, it's the most pure sport. It's just you against the clock. It's how fast the body can move. It's who's the fastest man in the world, and who's can throw the farthest and jump the longest. And it's so beautiful and it's raw. And I think there's so many sports that incorporate our sport. And I think the opportunity for us to be able to grow on a large scale and opportunities such as this to show just the range of athletes and the competition we're going to be able to have is going to be beautiful. And I'm very excited to be a part of it. And can't wait to see how far it goes.
Yeah. So track as a sport, in comparison to other sports, we don't get those, you get that moment every 4 years. from an athlete standpoint, do the athletes in the sport, when you get into this sport, is that something that is that important, to have that opportunity? Do you guys look at athletes in other sports? You're the best in your sport, but you don't have the same profile as they do. You're not earning as much as they do. You're not realizing as much value as athletes in other sports. Is it disappointing? How do you guys sort of, look at that? Does it affect your motivation to stay in the sport?
I think a lot of track athletes just love the sport. We're not as glamorous as a lot of other sports, but I think what we do is make the most of the opportunities that we do have. Obviously, we're excited to continue to create more opportunities for ourselves, to be more in those positions of other sports, and I think we're seeing that, and I think we're seeing a trend of that, but ultimately, we have amazing athletes who just sometimes don't get the opportunities. And the great thing about the media, the great thing about the opportunities such as Grand Slam and Instagram and all of these things that are happening is there is more visibility coming. There is more opportunity coming. I think I'm so excited with the LA Olympics coming up on our home soil to create more opportunities for track athletes. And even just looking at Paris, just the amount of traction we've been able to gain as a sport has been huge. So obviously, there's a lot of things we can do better, but I'm excited for the optimistic opportunities that are ahead.
Yeah. So women's sports, obviously, over the last few years, been getting a lot of traction, a significant push, and more investment and more focus on women's sports. As a female athlete, what's been your perspective as you've watched that, and sort of what do you think needs to happen, or what would you like to see happen for women's sports to get more support? Obviously for our sport, thankfully, it has always been gender equal. We've always had men and women athletes in our sport. We've always had an equal number of events. The prize money and compensation is equal. So we've never had that problem in our sport, but it certainly exists. And for female athletes, there's always been a struggle, even in a sport like ours, to kind of break through. So what's been your perspective on that as you've seen more investment and more focus on women's sports, and what would you like to see happen?
Yeah, I think just even these past few years, you're just seeing an inclination from the viewers to want to seek it out. I think maybe a few years ago, there was more of a desire from the athletes to want people to watch, but I think naturally you're seeing people who are interested in women's sports and are seeking it out and wanting to watch amazing women do amazing things. And I think we're seeing just more opportunities come forth to be able to broadcast that, to put that on platforms that maybe weren't previously there. And I think with the media and all of these things now that we have at our disposal, it's just becoming more and more of a possibility. I'm excited to be a part of a generation of female athletes that is just, I think, transcending so many different sports, especially just even watching the Olympics this past year. It's been special. And I think I take my role even just as an athlete to young girls, just very seriously wanting to represent the best way I can, because I know they're watching and I know the opportunities to continue to watch are only going to grow.
Yeah. So, you're 24 now, right?
25.
25.
Yes.
So you still got, you talked about LA, and obviously we're very excited about LA, the 28 Olympics coming here. At some point, it's going to come to an end for you, and you're going to move on. What do you see for yourself after your career is over? I mean, you've got the competitiveness, you've got, that drive, and do you see yourself using that in a way after your athletic career is ended, or, sort of what do you think you'll want to do with your life after you're done?
It's a great question. There's a lot of things I think that come to mind. Obviously, I would love to be a mom. I would love to raise a family with my husband, who's studying to be a pastor. I would love to be involved in the lives of young girls. I think that teenage years for me were a very rough time, even just around that Rio going to the Olympics. I think it's a very important time in a young girl's life. And whether that looks like mentorship, whether that looks like coaching, whatever that looks like, I just definitely want to be able to use some of the experiences and the wisdom that's been poured into me and pour that back into others. And maybe it would give me an opportunity to be a little bit competitive if I'm coaching, I don't know. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of opportunity ahead, and I'm just going to use the gifts I've been given to the best of my ability.
But you're not done yet on the track. So let's talk about, let's finish with that. Just, what you what excites you about the next 4 years? Obviously, yeah, LA coming up, it'll be amazing, and an Olympics on the home soil, which is an amazing opportunity. I had that opportunity in 1996 in Atlanta, and it was amazing and changed my life. But between now and then, what sort of goals do you have, and what motivates you, when you're on top as an athlete who's at the top of their sport?
I think the motivation is that there's always something you can do better. Until somebody runs 0.001, there's always something we can improve upon. And I think, to me, that's the beautiful thing about our sport. So I love pushing the bounds of what's possible. I think track and field right now is just in such a unique place where you're seeing athletes just do unbelievable things every year. And I think, to me, it's just so exciting to be a part of that, bringing it, especially back home for LA, and just the opportunities it's going to present for our sport. So I'm just going to continue to see what's possible, figure out what I need to work on and fix, and see how much lower we can get those times.
Yeah. I did have one other question. I was just thinking about this. So, I wanted to just have you this will be the last thing, just have you contrast, because you've had the journey to get to the top and now you're there, and just contrast those two, because a lot of people deal with that, a lot of folks in the audience will as well, trying to get to the top, is one thing, then you get there. And sometimes, and we talked about this before, sometimes that can be very challenging in a different way to getting to the top. So just talk about that from an athletic standpoint for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a different motivation when you're still trying to reach a certain point or pinnacle than getting there. But I think what keeps you there is just always finding something to keep chasing. I think when you become complacent, when you become comfortable, when you believe that where you are is all you need to be at, is where people start to become stagnant. And I think for me, my husband will tell you sometimes I'm imagining there's somebody faster than me who ran a certain time, and I'm chasing them still, you know what I mean? And I'm always just finding something that keeps me motivated, keeps me hungry. What else can I work on? What can I fix? What can I do better? Who's doing things better than me, and how can I become more like them? And so it's just constantly having something you're looking ahead towards. And I think that's what motivates me, almost as if I didn't make it to where I'm trying to go.
Yeah. Thank you, Sydney. Appreciate your time. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.